Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with New York City Jazz Saxophonist, composer, and educator Dave Glasser. We talked to him in early April 2020 about his new 2020 CD, Democracy's Hypocrisy, and this strange COVID-19 world we are all living in. Along with the music, he is a faculty member at the New School. He's been there for over 23 years. He is proud to have helped many of today's younger musicians. He's got great tales and a hopeful outlook on the future. Enjoy.
Where exactly are you located?
Yeah, I live in New York City, in Manhattan, in Chelsea. But at the current time, my family and I are up in Connecticut, in a little town called Old Lyme, where we have a house that's got a little bit of more isolation to it.
So, hopefully, they're talking out here that we haven't even hit the peak yet, and that we're still waiting for that to happen. But just kind of wait and see what's going on around here.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it looks like the latest in New York is that showing that the social distancing is working, because it's been about 2 weeks now, and it looks like at least the increase in amount of cases has subsided, and it's kind of flattened out a little bit. So that's a very small sample, but that's good news. So I think, if you get that social distancing started sooner, you can keep it from getting crazy. But meanwhile, we're all just like, weird, like a time warp, where all the stores are closed at 6 o'clock, and it's crazy. All the meals are made in the house. And
believe me, man, that's kind of the way. We've been on pretty much a lockdown for, I'm losing a concept of time, but it's been a while. I remember going to the pharmacy a couple weeks ago when New York was starting to really get bad, and I was talking to the pharmacist, and he said, we basically here in Kansas City did what New York should have done like 3 weeks ago. So what I'm hoping, and I have friends that work in the healthcare industry here, is I'm hoping that maybe it won't get as bad here, just because we did this so long ago and we've been preemptive about it. And my hope is that a lot of communities across the country here have started to do this and taken heed, and that we get to a point where we can get back to life, because this is something that I can't imagine spiraling any longer than, through April. I mean, I just don't even know what that would do to the morale and the mentality of this country if it goes on and on and on.
Yeah, not to mention the economy. I mean, people got to work, It's like people got to pay rent. I mean, all the gigs have been canceled for March, April, and May, and probably further than that. So it's and that's not only the music industry, but I mean, so yeah, definitely. And I mean, you guys are smart. There are a lot of places in the country that did not heed that warning, and kind of kept thinking, oh, well, it's not going to come out here. So, you guys are in good shape if you went ahead and did that at the same time New York did. That should make a big difference. Yeah,
I'm hoping so. Yeah, and their cases are kind of trickling up. There was a big spike last week, but, the Surgeon General, of course, said this week's the true telltale. So I hope by this coming weekend we get some serious data that says, look, this is where we're at, and we're going to start flattening this so that we can hopefully get back to our lives, because this is something else, man.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But at any rate, I think one of the things that I'm trying to do with my time is really engage you musicians and really have a good, raw conversation during a very unique time in our human history. And maybe it's an oasis for all of us to have kind of a conversation about music and to kind of get away from the headlines for a little bit.
Sounds good to me.
So thanks for taking a minute out. And I'm going to just start off. You just mentioned putting up your CD on CD Baby called Democracy's Hypocrisy. And I can't imagine anything more apropos than something named that right now with what's going on in our world. So talk to me a little bit about this new album.
Yeah, well, actually, the title that was my original idea, but the title actually is Hypocrisy, Democracy. So
I gotcha.
I'm not sure why. You probably got some earlier, that was what I was originally going to call it, but then I think the wording got changed. It's better this way. So just make sure you got it right. Hypocrisy, democracy. Yeah, and I mean, the thing is it's not really. It's important to me that the record. I mean, if we're what I would like is for people to engage in food for thought, for the record to be, a stimulus for that, and not to be in terms of, any political party. I know it's easy for people to say that, but it really wasn't conceived like that at all. It's not. It's much bigger than that. The idea is that over the history of the planet, human beings have seemed to have a propensity to struggle with these kinds of things. The difference between anarchy and being and having to dominate each other, and these kinds of things that have led to wars and led to all these kinds of things. So I think we are in a really trying and interesting time now, as you said, and people like the titles of the songs, like freedom. That means to some people that means freedom to do whatever they want to do whenever they want to do it. To other people, it means, opportunity for equal opportunity for different people. So I think it's important for the individuals to think about what it means to them. So that's kind of what I'm hoping it might end up being a part of.
So talk to me a little bit about your upbringing, where you were born and raised, kind of how you got into jazz.
In junior high school, I went to an arts-based curriculum high school. I come from a history of immigrants from the Poland and Russian Jewish side on one side of my father's side. On my mother's side, it was German Gentile. So I was brought up in a very sort of non-specific religious way, and my grandfather on my father's side was grew up on the Lower East Side, poor immigrant, involved in the early development of the unions and things like this. So I grew up in Manhattan, and I went to IS 70, where we had kind of an arts-based curriculum, and I started playing saxophone in the 7th or 8th grade, and just got into jazz. Had a friend whose father was a jazz pianist named Cecil Young, and he had a lot of records, and his name was Pavel Carey. He's still around, and we turned me on to a lot of music. I started studying. I started taking some lessons from Lee Konitz and Frank Porowski, and the rest is sort of history. Went to Eastman School of Music, and then I started working with Illinois Jaquette and all those people.
So was it always music for you from the word go, or were there other dreams that you had?
Well, it's interesting. I got into music at a time in my life when it almost kind of rescued me. I mean, I was rather intimidated and picked on somewhat in the sixth grade, and then when I started playing saxophone, I really don't know why I wanted to play the saxophone. I was very determined to play saxophone and only saxophone, and luckily I got that opportunity. It kind of rescued me because I got kind of good at it, and then suddenly I was, accepted. I was in the jazz band, and I was accepted and hanging out with the cool kids, and so I just got into it, and I became totally obsessed with it and dropped everything else. It wasn't until much later in my life that I started realizing, geez, I could have been a scientist or something. I never even thought of it, so interesting story.
So, you've mentioned some pretty big names that have, helped you along and that you've learned from. What have you learned from the elders, the legends of jazz? What have they given you that's resonated, not only with you as a player, but also as an educator?
I always tried to surround myself with people as much as I could who were older than me. Lots of people, Lee was my teacher when I was 15. I didn't even know who he was when I started studying with him. over the course of my career with Illinois Jazz and all the people in his band, people like Irvin Stokes and people like, Richard Wyans and well, the list is, there's a lot of people, Eddie Locke, and of course Clark Terry and all the people in the Basie band, Frank Foster and Bill Hughes and all those people. I think, for me what was most important was trying to get the feel of this music. The notes can be figured out. They've all been written down now. But I think that what I always aspired to get a better understanding of, and what I really learned most from all those people, is just about the feeling of this music, the approach to it, the essence of it, which is about healing, it's about soothing, it's about emotion, and it's about culture, and it's that elusive, I like to call it, thing we call swing, and it's a lot of different things for a lot of people, but to me those are the two most important things: swinging and the feel of the music, however you want to describe it, and the emotional expression. So those are the things that I feel like I learned most from all those people.
What was the first live jazz show you ever saw where you were like, man, that's what I want to do with my life?
Oh, well, the one that stands out to me the most is I was a big Dexter Gordon fan. He was like my first major influence, and this would have been in the late 70s. So he made a record called Homecoming, live at the Village Vanguard, double album, with Woody Shaw, Ronnie Matthews, Louis Hayes, and they were playing at the Vanguard, and so I asked my father if I could go. I guess I was, 15, 16, something like that, and they took me to there. So that was probably the one that was most prominent in my mind, seeing that group live at the Village Vanguard.
It's wild, man. You saying that right before all of this, like the night that we got the announcement that things were going to head down a path of quarantine, there was an event where Maxine Gordon was at a community college here in Kansas, and I knew just in my guts that it was going to be one of the last things I was going to be able to do in public. And I went, and Miss Deborah Brown was there and introduced her, and she was talking about his book, Sophisticated Giant, and I got to go up and ask her a question afterwards, and I asked her, why is Dexter timeless? What is it? She was like, no one's ever asked me. She was really excited about it. So my brain was opening up when you said Dexter, because it was kind of a cool moment to share a moment with her and talk about Dexter in the flesh. So I've only recently met Maxine. I did read her book. He was a big influence of mine. I got a chance when I was in 1988, when I was working with Illinois Jazz Big Band on the SS Norway. One of my biggest thrills that Dexter was on that ship, and he was just a guest. He wasn't one of the performers, but and probably Maxine was there too. And so, anyways, I had been playing with Illinois, and after the set was over, I went up to the bar and to get something to drink, and lo and behold, right next to me was Dexter Gordon, sitting there at the bar listening to the band. And he leaned over to me, because of course he was about, he looked down upon me and said, you play nice lead alto, which to me was sort of, one of the finest moments of my life, and so I got a couple pictures with him, and it's a hell of a thing to try to to realize that, with all these masters that have touched so many of us, that those in my generation, that we are now charged with somehow carrying on this great tradition and this great music and this great spirit. So it's very humbling, quite honestly, but I'm very appreciative for all the opportunities that I had to brush shoulders with the people that I have. Right on. So, what do you like best about being a musician?
I guess it's fun to play music. It feels good to you, but it's also it's most enjoyable when you feel like you can bring joy to others. You know, if things are going well during a performance, you see people smiling and talking, and you know they don't want to go home. You know, it's this feeling of joyful exuberance that I think is really, to me, what jazz is about in many ways, and it's, I think, what attracted me and what attracts many people to the music. So I think that's what I enjoy the most, is being able to be a part of that. And I mean, it's nice to have the freedom to do what you want. There's lots of struggles involved in that. But you know, that's and actually I do a lot of teaching now. You mentioned that before, and I neglected to really get into that. But I would say that, you know, in my teaching, I feel very strongly that although I have graduated from the Eastman School of Music with 2 degrees, most of my teaching and concept comes from the masters that I was able to come to work with. And you know, the thing that I try to instill upon the students is exactly that, you know, that the music is more than it's more than just notes, it's more than complexity, it's more than you know, pyrotechnics. You know, it's really about the people. You know, it's about an exchange of energy between the musicians and the people on an artistic experience. You know, that I think we sometimes lose track of. You know, we have to remember that this music is here because people gravitated to it naturally. It wasn't promoted in the beginning. It started to be promoted when it became clear that money could be made from it. So I think this, you know, these are some of the things that we really have to think about individually, you know, as to why we listen to music and why we play music.
When the jazz comes back into a live capacity and we get to return to our lives, what are you hoping both the musician and the audience member gets from this experience that enhances their live experience and just getting back out into regular life?
Well, I just posted a thing on Instagram. I had an experience recently where I was just kind of in a daze as I was working so hard, and I was walking from one lesson to a class, and I was walking in the wrong direction. And a student of mine who was in the class said, "Dave, where are you going?" And I said, "Oh, I'm so glad I ran into you, man. And now I know where I'm supposed to be going. It's this way." And you know, it just came to me, that song, you know, from 1963, people who need people. And I just, I've been playing that song lately, and I think that maybe that's what we learned from this, you know, is that people need people, you know. And I hope that things slow down enough and people understand that, you know, there's more to life than, you know, winning. There's more to life than beating somebody else. There's more to life than you know, unbridled profit, you know, and that we should all work together to make life on this planet sustainable and more pleasurable, you know. And I think I think we're in a period of narcissism right now, you know, and I think narcissism and profiteering, and I think people are very controlled, whether they know it or not. And I think if you ask most people why they do what they do, I'm not sure they could even really answer that. And I think that's a question people should try to answer for themselves. Why do I like this music? Why do I stay in my house and watch TV? Why, you know, I mean, all these kinds of things. Are you really choosing to do, are you really looking at the entire spectrum of choices that are available to you and making the best choice for you? And do you really know why you're doing that? I think most of us don't have time to do that these days. And if anything, I'd like to see people take and make the time to do that. And I think only then will the profits, the things that are being sold and the things that are being bought change, because the people are, really we want people, what freedom is the individual ability to make your own choices and make up your own mind, free thought, and I think you can't have free thought when you're working as hard as you possibly can just to get from 1 minute to the next. And you can't, so I think this is something that we should try to build into our system. I don't know if I answered that question, but
you did. No, and I think that's a reverberating sentiment, and I've thought about that when it comes to the realm of like arts and entertainment. I think there might be a lot of musicians and actors that realize they have the income and they have the wherewithal and they can just be with their families and not run around like maniacs all the time.
Art has, in any form, has always been a part of human society. So as far as we can look back and figure out, in every culture, it's different, but and so you have to really think about what is the purpose of art in society. These are the questions that I pose to my students now. These are the questions that I ask people to think about. If art doesn't make a fortune because it's not something you need, or it's not immediately gratifying, then does that necessarily mean that it has no value? Maybe we need to be a little bit smarter than that. Maybe we need to be a little bit more discerning. Maybe we need to say, art has always been here because it's a necessary part of a healthy society, and that, but unless you slow down and take some time to absorb it, you can't really experience it. So I think the racing around that we're doing, this sort of position that we're in, where every single day the amount of time that we have is a little bit shorter, and the goal is to do everything as fast as possible and as quickly as possible and as easy as possible, I think that is making it impossible for us to absorb deeper understanding of things. And I think in the long run, that's going to be tragic. As a matter of fact, I think we're already seeing some of the results of those kinds of things. And in some kind of way, if you want to think really figuratively, and I don't say this to belittle the pain that anybody from this pandemic might be going to, but one thing it has done is it has forced everybody to stop and slow down. It has forced everybody to get back into their families. It has forced everybody to think and self-reflect. And I don't know, if you want to call it an act of God, or if you want to call it some kind of spiritual thing, or nature, or just dumb luck. The question is, how are we going to react to it? And, who are we going to be afterwards? Are we going to be different, or are we just going to keep doing things the way we've always done them? We've been doing them, I should say.
So my final question to you is this. Everyone has their perception of you, your family, your friends, your students, your fans, but you're living your life. Who do you think you are?
Oh, I'm a lot of people. I honestly struggle with that sometimes because I feel like there's the Dave Glasser who's the jazz musician. There's the Dave Glasser who's the teacher. Those are pretty close together, but they're not 100% together. There's the jazz musician who's the father, the jazz musician who's the husband, the jazz musician who just likes, or I should say the Dave Glasser who just likes to be outside splitting wood, and being living in the country all by himself off the grid. There's just so many different parts of myself. Sometimes I struggle to figure out, the answer to that. Like, I guess I'm all of those things, but it's sometimes they're in conflict with each other, and that presents its own challenges, But I hope that people perceive me as a nice person, and I have always really just wanted. As a musician, my goal has always been to be respected by the musicians that I respect, and I feel like I feel that. So sometimes I think, I've achieved enough with this saxophone, and I'd like to do something completely different. But that's easier said than done. And so far, I'm still making music, but I'm hoping that I guess maybe this record is a bit of a reflection of that. I mean, I feel like art is a reflection of society. I feel like this record has some commentary to it. I feel like it's a comment on what we're going through now. I feel like for me, it's a little bit expressive of what I was just kind of talking to you about, and I think that's what artists do, and that's what art is, and I hope that people can identify with it and you know, and get something positive and worthwhile out of it.
Absolutely, I think they will. Hey, man, thank you for taking some time out today in this kind of extraordinary time of our human existence to talk about music and what's going on in our world. I really appreciate it.
Hey, man, I appreciate you calling me.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in New York City, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Dave for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit Neon Jazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.